Faye Merritt set the leather account ledger on Victor's desk at midnight. Not with anger, not with ceremony, but with the quiet finality of a woman who has just heard herself described in a way she cannot unhear. She had maintained that ledger for 4 years. She would not pick it up again. The summer of 1829 had been wet in Philadelphia, the kind of wet that turned the cobblestones dark and pressed the smell of the river into every room, every curtain, every hour. What was dry, what had always been dry, was the inside of the Merritt household. Dry in the way that houses become when two people have learned to speak around each other instead of to each other. Faye had learned the language of avoidance early in the marriage. Victor had never noticed there was anything to learn. She had been in the small room off the study when they arrived. Victor and his business partner, Cormac Dawson, coming in from a late supper at the Exchange, carrying the particular energy of men who had been talking for hours and did not intend to stop. She had gone in to retrieve the household accounts she'd left on the side table. She had not meant to stay. But the voices reached her before she could move, and something in the tone of them, familiar, settled, the tone of men who believe themselves unheard, made her go still. She'll need to be kept uninformed, Dawson was saying. Not cruelly, just practically. Victor's answer came without hesitation. That's never been a problem. Faye doesn't trouble herself with the workings of it. She keeps the household accounts, manages the staff, appears when I need her to appear. A pause. The sound of glasses. She's a sensible woman. She takes what she's given and calls it a good life. And if the restructuring means her position changes, she won't know the position has changed until it's already done. Victor said it the way a man says something he has considered thoroughly and found sound. Not cruel, not boastful. Practical. Women in her situation are accustomed to discovering arrangements after the fact. The important thing is not to alarm her before it's settled. Dawson laughed, a comfortable laugh, the laugh of a man who had never once worried about the thing they were discussing. Lucky man, to have that at home. Convenient, Victor said. That's the word for it. Faye stood perfectly still in the small room for a long time after they moved through to the study. She stood until the quiet around her stopped feeling like shock and started feeling like something older, something she had been carrying, without naming for 5 years of marriage. She stood until she understood that she was not hurt the way she might have been at 22. She was something else. She was clear. She had married Victor Merritt at 22, because their fathers had arranged it sensibly, and because she had not yet learned to distinguish between a man who respected you and a man who found you useful. She had come to the Merritt house on Spruce Street with a good education, a facility with numbers that her father had taught her, and a genuine willingness to make the marriage into something real. Victor was not a bad man. He was simply a man who had never been asked to look closely at anyone but himself, and so he did not. In the first year, she had taken over the household accounts from the housekeeper, who had been managing them badly. In the second year, when Victor came home exhausted from a difficult quarter, and left his business correspondence in a heap on the study desk, she had organized it without being asked, sorted by date and correspondent, and outstanding balance. Because disorder made her anxious and because it was there. He had noticed the improvement and not asked how it had happened. She had not offered to explain. By the 4th year, she was maintaining 2 sets of records, the household ledger and the auxiliary files Victor brought home when he was behind on his clerking, and he still did not know she did it. He saw the results. He did not see her. She had told herself, those 4 years, that this was a reasonable trade, that this was what marriage was, that the satisfaction of work done well was its own kind of compensation, even without credit. She had told herself a great many things. What she had not told herself was the things she understood now, standing in the dark side room of her own house, that convenience and contentment are not the same thing, that she had been one to him and had spent 5 years believing she was the other. She went upstairs. She did not go to sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed and did what she had always done when she needed to think. She made a list, not on paper, in her mind where no one could read it. What she had. $27 she had set aside from the household budget, a coin at a time, over 2 years. Her mother's correspondence, kept in a box at the bottom of the wardrobe. The household ledger, which contained 4 years of her own labor in figures Victor would never decode without her. Her mother's cousin Enos Parrish, who lived in Lancaster and ran a dry goods concern, and whom Faye had visited once, at 17, and remembered as a woman who wasted nothing, including words. What she did not have, a plan but a direction. She sat with that until the night went gray at the windows. Then she began to move. This is the part the world does not tell you about leaving. It is not the dramatic gesture that is hardest. It is the 2 days before, when you are still inside the life you are preparing to exit, setting things quietly in order without anyone noticing. Faye spent those 2 days finishing what she had started. She completed the quarter ledger. She organized the outstanding correspondence. She left the household accounts in a state any competent person could follow. Because she did not believe in leaving a mess, simply because she had been given one. And in the evenings, she packed slowly, carefully, only what had been hers before the marriage. Her mother's letters, 2 dresses, the small purse with the $27, a volume of her father's accounting principles she had carried since she was 16. She wrote Victor a note. She had thought about it for a long time. The way you think about something you have only one chance to say correctly. In the end, she wrote 6 words. I have taken nothing that belongs to you. She left it on top of the ledger on his desk. She left the Spruce Street house at 5 in the morning, before the household stirred, and walked to the coaching inn on Market Street, to catch the 6 o'clock Lancaster stage. The man at the inn was a surveyor named Reed Stanton, out of Lancaster County, waiting on the same stage with a roll of maps under his arm, and the look of someone accustomed to early mornings. He did not speak to her right away. He had coffee and read his papers and let her alone, which she appreciated, because she was still in the part of herself that needed quiet to hold. When the stage was delayed, a wheel, the innkeeper said, half an hour. She sat with her bag on her lap in the common room, and Reed Stanton looked up from his papers and said, without preamble, Lancaster Road splits at Downingtown. If your destination is north of Lancaster proper, you'll want to tell the driver the east approach, not the main toll road. It runs 20 minutes longer, but the bridge at Conestoga is reliable. The main road's been washing out on the north bank when it rains. It has been raining, Faye said. It has, he agreed, and looked back at his papers. She studied him briefly, the way she studied everything, efficiently, and filed it. He was perhaps 30, broad across the shoulders, with the squarish, careful hands of someone who spent his days measuring things. He was not performing anything. He was simply sitting there, giving her useful information the way a person gives directions, because you have it, and someone might need it. Thank you, she said. He nodded once and said nothing further. They rode to Lancaster in the same coach and spoke 3 more times. Once when he offered his canteen at a stop, because the inn had only warm water. Once when he confirmed the east approach to the driver, unprompted, because he had remembered where she was going without her telling him again. And once, near the end, when she looked out the window at the Conestoga Valley opening below them and said, without quite meaning to say it aloud, "It's larger than I remembered." "The valley?" he said. "Everything," she said, and then felt slightly foolish, but he only looked out the window himself and said, "Tends to be, when you come back to something after a long time." He did not ask why she was traveling alone, or where she had come from, or why her jaw was set the way it was. The particular set of someone holding themselves together by effort of intention. He simply did not ask. She was beginning to understand that this was rarer than it should be. Enos Parrish opened the door of the dry goods shop on Queen Street before Faye had finished climbing the step. She was perhaps 60, with white hair pinned close, and the posture of a woman who had spent decades doing things the right way, because doing them wrong cost more in the end. She looked at Faye, the way a person looks at something they have been half expecting. "You look like you've been on a coach since before sunrise," Enos said. "Since 5, Faye said. And stepped aside. "Come in. I have coffee and cold ham, and no particular need to know anything you're not ready to say." The shop was closed at this hour, but the back rooms were warm, and ordered in a way Faye recognized immediately. Not wealthy, not spare, but deliberate. Every surface served a purpose. The account books were stacked by quarter on the left side of the desk. The correspondence was sorted by supplier. Faye saw all of this in 10 seconds and felt something loosen slightly in her chest. The relief of being in a room organized by someone who thought the way she thought. She ate. She told Enos what she needed to tell. The marriage, the 5 years, the conversation she had overheard, the ledger she had left on the desk. Enos listened without interrupting. When Faye finished, Enos was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you in danger?" "No," Faye said. "Victor isn't that kind of man. He's the other kind. The kind who arranges things so other people do what he wants, without him having to do anything uncomfortable. That kind can be more difficult," Enos said. "Discomfort can be negotiated with. Arrangement cannot until you disrupt it. Faye looked at her. You sound like you've seen this before. I've seen most things before, Ines said simply. She stood and went to the back shelf, where a row of ledgers sat beside a small wooden box. She opened the box and took out a folded document, old, the paper gone soft at the creases. She set it on the table in front of Faye. It was a trust instrument, filed with the Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds in 1806. Established by Faye's maternal grandfather, a man who had died when Faye was 3, whom she knew only from a portrait, in the name of his daughter, and upon her daughter's death, in the name of her female heir, to be transferred upon that heir's majority, free and separate from any marital estate. Faye read it twice, then she looked up. My grandfather, she said. Knew what happened to women's property when they married, Ines said. He'd watched it happen to 2 of his sisters. He was a careful man. She paused. There is $200 in a Lancaster bank account, established under the trust, and a 1/4 interest in a parcel of commercial property on Prince Street, 3 blocks from here. It has been rented to a milliner for 11 years. The rental income has been accumulating. How much? Faye said. Ines told her. Faye sat very still. Why didn't anyone tell me? She said, and the words came out quieter than she intended, with something underneath them she hadn't prepared for. Not anger, something older. The feeling of a person who has been moving carefully through a dark room and has just learned there was a lamp in the corner the whole time. Your mother intended to tell you when you came of age, Ines said. She died when you were 16, and by the time you were 20, and then 22 and married, the information was here and you were there, and she stopped. I should have written, I did not write. That is a failure I own. Faye looked at the document again. She pressed her palm flat against it, against her grandfather's signature, his careful, deliberate handwriting. He had never met her. He had built this structure for a granddaughter who hadn't been born yet, because he understood that the world would try to take things from her, and he had wanted her to have somewhere to stand. She was 27 years old. She had $27 in her purse, $240 in a bank she hadn't known existed, a 1/4 interest in a property on Prince Street in Lancaster, and a husband who had called her convenient 3 nights ago, and was going to discover very shortly that convenience, like most arrangements, depends on the cooperation of everyone involved. Victor's letter arrived 4 days after she did. It was 2 pages, measured and formal, the kind of letter a man writes when he is managing a situation, not speaking to a person, managing a thing that has gotten out of its expected place. He had been surprised to find her gone. He was confident they could resolve this misunderstanding through reasonable conversation. He expected her return by the end of the following week. Faye read it once, set it down, and went back to the supply inventory she had been helping Ines reconcile. The lawyer was a man named Cyrus Norris, in a small office above a chandler's shop on King Street. He had a long face and the habit of reading things twice, which Faye respected. He read the trust instrument twice. This is solid, he said. Your grandfather's solicitor knew what he was doing. The separation clause is specific and was recorded properly. Your husband has no claim on these assets. Not under Pennsylvania law and not under the explicit terms of the instrument. He doesn't know the assets exist, Faye said. He will, Norris said. When you move to claim the bank account and formalize the property interest, notice will be served. Good, Faye said. Norris looked at her over his papers. You're certain? I've been keeping accounts for a man who believed I didn't understand what accounts were, she said. I'd like to keep my own. Norris was quiet for a moment, then he opened his ledger. Let's begin. Victor's response to the legal notice arrived through his own Philadelphia lawyer, questioning the validity of the trust, and suggesting that assets accumulated during the marriage were subject to marital claim. Norris read the argument with the expression of a man who found it technically creative and legally incorrect. The trust predated the marriage by 16 years. Victor's lawyer knew this. He was hoping the cost of defending it discouraged her. He had miscalculated what she was willing to absorb. Victor came himself on a Thursday, 3 weeks after she had left. He rode up to the shop on Queen Street, dressed for Philadelphia. Too formal for Lancaster, too composed for a man who had been traveling since before dawn. He had prepared himself carefully. That meant the conversation mattered more to him than he would admit. Ines opened the door and stepped aside without a word. Victor came in. He saw Faye at the desk and stopped. She stood. She did not go to him. She waited. Faye, he said. Victor, she said. He looked around the shop, the orderly shelves, the account books stacked precisely, the evidence of a working life, and something crossed his face that she could not quite name. Recognition, possibly, or the discomfort of a man confronting evidence that the person he had categorized is more than the category. "Come home," he said. He said it without the managed tone of the letter. She had not expected that. "Not for appearances. I want to have a real conversation." "We're having one now," she said. He exhaled. "What you heard in the study, I know how it sounded." "How did it sound to you?" He was quiet. He had the look of a man who had rehearsed several responses and found none of them sufficient for the actual room he was standing in. "Convenient," she said for him. "That was the word you used." His jaw moved. "I have managed your household for 5 years," she said. And her voice was level, the voice she used with ledgers and correspondence. Not cold, just accurate. "I have organized your business files since the 2nd year of our marriage. You brought them home in disorder, and I sorted them because disorder is costly, and because I was capable of it and you needed it done. You have thanked the results without knowing their origin. I have been the reason your quarter reports were legible, and your correspondence timely, and your supplier accounts current. You believed that happened on its own." Victor stared at her. "I also know about the Lancaster accounts," she said. "I organized that file 3 months ago when you were ill and behind on your clerking. I know the figures, the counterparties, the terms of the restructuring you're planning with Dawson. I know what my legal position would be if that restructuring proceeds as drafted." She paused. "And I know that you did not know I knew any of that." The silence that followed was not the managed silence of a man thinking. It was the silence of a man who has just understood that the map he has been using was drawn wrong, and that the territory has been entirely different from what he thought. "You never said anything," he said finally. "You never asked," she said. "I kept telling myself that the right moment would come, that you would look up from the work one day and see who had been doing it beside you." She kept her eyes on his, level and clear. "That's my part in this, Victor. I let you not know me because I was grateful for whatever you did give me. That's done now." He looked at the desk. He looked at her. He looked like a man standing in a room he thought he knew, finding the walls in different places. "The trust," he said. "Is mine," she said. "Legally, clearly, predating the marriage by 16 years. Your lawyer's argument won't hold, and Norris has already drafted the response." She tilted her head just slightly. "You could fight it, and Norris would win, and the court record would be public, and people in Philadelphia would ask why Victor Merritt is contesting a 40-year-old inheritance instrument filed by his wife's grandfather. People would want to know what kind of man does that. I think you know the answer doesn't favor you." He was quiet for a long time. She watched him. This man she had known for 5 years, who had never been cruel, never violent, never anything so definite as a villain. He was something harder to name. A man who had arranged his life so that inconvenient things were handled before they reached him, and had called that good management. She did not hate him. She could not hate someone for failing to look when they had never been taught that looking was required. But she was done being the thing he did not look at. "What do you want?" he said. She had been ready for this question. She had thought about it on the coach to Lancaster, in the mornings before Enos was up, in the quiet accounting hours, when her hands were busy and her mind was free. "The trust assets, recognized and released without contest," she said. "My name cleared in any court correspondence. And an end to the marriage that reflects what it actually was. An arrangement between our fathers that neither of us chose for the right reasons." She paused. "I'm not asking for punishment. I'm asking for an accurate account." Victor stood with that. Outside, the Lancaster morning went on, a cart on the street, a woman calling across to a neighbor, the ordinary sound of people going about their day. "All right," he said. The words were small. They landed in the room with unexpected weight. "I'll contact Norris," he said. "This week." He picked up his hat. He looked at her one more time, and in that look was something she had wanted for 5 years and no longer needed. Recognition. He saw her, not all of her, not the full account of what she had done and who she was, but enough to know that he had missed it. "You were never just convenient," he said. It was not an apology. It was what a man says when arithmetic he has been avoiding finally comes due. She said nothing. He walked out. Faye stood in the shop on Queen Street and listened to his horse on the cobblestones until the sound was gone. Her hands were steady. She noticed this. Ince came in from the back room. She looked at Faye's face and did not ask. "He agreed," Faye said. I heard, Ines said. She went to the shelf and poured 2 glasses of cider. The property on Prince Street, she said, setting one in front of Faye. I've been thinking about what it might be used for, if you decided to stay. Faye sat down. She looked at the glass. She looked at the account books on the desk. Ines's books, which she had been working through for 2 weeks with the clean pleasure of work she was genuinely suited for. I've been thinking about the same thing, she said. The trust was released 6 weeks later. The milliner's accumulated rental income transferred to an account in Faye's name at the Lancaster Bank and Trust. The property interest was formalized in the county record. Her name stood in those records plainly, without a husband's name attached to it, without qualification, without the small erasures that had been standard practice for as long as anyone could remember. Faye stood at the recorder's office counter and held the document for a long time before she folded it. Reed Stanton was waiting outside, not because she had asked him to. He had a survey commission to file at the county office next door and had timed it, he said, because the walk back to Queen Street was the same direction and he was not in a hurry. She had been in Lancaster 8 weeks by then and had stopped being surprised by the careful, undemanding quality of his company. He simply showed up, said useful things when useful things needed saying, and asked nothing she wasn't ready to give. Well, he said. She held up the document. Something moved across his face. Quiet and genuine, the expression of a person who is glad for someone else without needing to perform it. Your grandfather, he said. Built a door, she said, 30 years ago, for someone he hadn't met yet. She folded the document and put it in her coat. I've been thinking about that. They walked back along King Street in the late autumn morning, the air going crisp at the edges, the leaves on the square turning the particular amber that Pennsylvania always managed in October. She had been in this town 8 weeks. It had started to feel less like refuge and more like location. The difference, she was beginning to understand, between running from something and choosing somewhere. The letter she wrote to Victor was 4 sentences, in her own hand. She told him the trust matter was closed. She told him she hoped his restructuring with Dawson proceeded as planned. She told him that the Spruce Street household would run better if he hired a proper bookkeeper, and that she recommended someone trained in double-entry method, because that was the system she had been using, and it was the reason his files had been legible for the past 4 years. She did not wish him ill. She simply closed the account, the way you close an account when the ledger is balanced, and there is nothing more to carry forward. The woman who came to the shop on Queen Street in November was named Wren Hollis, small and sharp-faced, with the careful posture of someone who had learned to take up very little room. She had come from 2 counties over, sent by a woman who had heard from a woman who had spoken to Ines at the Lancaster market. She had been managing her late husband's mill accounts for 3 years since his death, and his business partner was now claiming in a letter to the county court that she was not competent to understand what she was administering. I understand everything I'm administering, Wren said. I understood it better than my husband did in the last 2 years of his life, and he knew it, and he trusted me with it. Her voice was steady, but her hands, folded on the table, were white at the knuckles. I just need someone who can look at the books and tell me if I'm right. Faye looked at her. She looked at those hands. She had sat in rooms where her own hands had done the same thing, holding themselves together by effort of will, trying not to show what was happening underneath. Show me the books, she said. Wren set them on the table. Faye opened the first one. Inside of 4 minutes she could see that Wren was right. The accounts were meticulous. The method was consistent. There was not a figure out of place. You've been keeping these in good order, Faye said. Wren closed her eyes for a half second. I know. Then let's make sure everyone else knows it too, Faye said. I'll need to review all 3 years and write up a summary Norris can take to the county. That will take time and it will cost something. But the argument your husband's partner is making will not survive a competent accounting review. She paused. Can you give me the week? Wren looked at her with the particular look of a person who has been disappointed enough times to hold hope carefully at arm's length. Yes, she said. Reed found Faye that evening still at the desk, the mill account spread before her. A new sheet of notes started in her own hand. He stood in the doorway, looked at the desk, looked at her. You're taking a case. I appear to be, she said, without looking up. He came and sat in the corner chair. The lamp on the desk threw a warm circle of light, and outside, Lancaster settled into the quiet of a November evening. Faye finished the line she was writing, She looked up. "Say whatever you're thinking," she said. He looked at her with the steady, clear attention he brought to everything. "I think you know what you're doing," he said. "I don't think you need me to tell you that it's the right thing, or that it will work, or that you're capable of it. You know all of that already." "Then what are you going to say?" "I'm going to ask," he said, "if you'd be willing to let me be part of whatever this becomes. Not in front of it. Not deciding direction." He paused. "I know these counties. I know where the property disputes are, and which estates have records no one's looked at in years, and which families have women in them doing work that isn't credited. That kind of information might be useful to someone doing what you're doing." Faye looked at him for a long moment. "It would be useful," she said. "Then I'm offering it," he said. "That's all." That's all. She had spent 5 years with a man who offered things with invisible strings attached, and she had learned the weight of those strings by carrying them. She knew the difference between an offer and a claim. Reed Stanton's offer had the weight of exactly what it was. A man choosing to be present for something he found genuinely worth being present for, asking nothing in return except to be allowed to stay. "All right," she said, and turned back to the mill accounts. He picked up the Lancaster paper from the side table and read it, and the evening went on around them, and the accounts took shape under Faye's hand, and the lamp burned steadily on the desk that had become, over 8 weeks and without anyone making a formal arrangement about it, her desk. On the first morning of December, Faye opened a new ledger. The cover was plain brown cloth, unremarkable. She had bought it herself at the stationer's on King Street and paid for it out of the account that was, for the first time in her life, entirely her own. She wrote the date at the top of the first page. Below it she wrote the name, F. Norwood Merritt, Accounts and Consultation, Prince Street, Lancaster. Below that she wrote the first entry, Wren Hollis Mill Accounts Review, 3-year period. Fee agreed. Work commenced. She set her pen down. She sat back and looked at the room. The shelves, the account books, the window that faced the street where Lancaster was beginning its day. She thought of her grandfather's signature at the bottom of a document filed in 1806, bold and unhesitating. The hand of a man who had built something in the dark and trusted that someone would find it. She thought of the door he had made for her, and the 30 years it had waited, and the morning she had finally walked through it. Not because someone led her, not because someone rescued her, but because she had packed a bag and chosen a direction and kept moving until the door was there. Some women do not leave loudly. They leave before the household wakes, with one bag and a clear mind and the knowledge, finally held without apology, that they are more than what was asked of them. They leave and they walk into the unfamiliar, and they do not stop walking until they find the thing that was always theirs. The inheritance, the capability, the name. And then they open the ledger, and they write the first entry, and they begin. She picked up her pen. She began.